Hey everyone, and welcome to the HR Vision podcast. I'm your host, Ivo, and every week I'm going to have a conversation that matters about HR and HR technology. Hello there. Welcome to episode 39 of the HR Vision podcast. If you follow us for a while, we have a pretty familiar face today. Hey, Dan. How's it going?
Yeah, it's good to be back.
Yeah, indeed. I think this is your fourth time on the podcast, right? If we include the Christmas special.
Of course, we include the Christmas
Of
special.
course, it was the best one ever. Yeah. All right. Today, Dan and I will talk about a very specific subject: the ongoing merge announced last year by Microsoft that will bring the Dynamics 365 HR module back to finance and operations. What will this look like through an HR department point of view? That's exactly what we'll discuss today and try to make a bit clearer. Then, you ready?
Yeah, let's go for it. Yeah, let's jump in.
Let's go for it. So, just as an introduction for people that haven't heard about this yet, and some people didn't, what will this merge be about? What is this?
So I think Bert was on the podcast originally, and he coined the term saying it's coming home. That was I think back in that 2016 or something. They split HR out from finance and operations into its own platform. It was all standalone. They were limited to what you could develop and change. And after some internal conversations with Microsoft or whatever they're going to do on their end, they're merging the two back together. So effectively, the HR platform that a lot of our clients and people out in the world are going to be using are going to become a finance and operations instance.
Okay.
So with that, because we talked a lot in the past about, well, not necessarily me, but all the people on the podcast, a lot of the information that's come out and that's gone out to people is very, very limited to more technical aspects. I thought it'd be nice to kind of have a chat about some of the more functional things that people are going to go through, how it's going to affect HR users, how it's going to affect users in the organization, and what the kind of impact is. So with the change and with the merge, there will be certain things that are going to change from a HR perspective.
Yeah.
The first big thing that will change will be the overall layout. So it's going to change from standalone D365 HR box with all your modules on the left-hand side to the finance and operations box. So everything effectively stays the same. It just goes into a much bigger playground, basically. So instead of everything being HR is one module in a much bigger environment, which caters to purchasing, finance, sales, production, manufacturing, warehouses, and all that jazz. All the core functionality that we will have discussed in the past, so the trinity of records like jobs, positions, workers, all of that stays the same. All the core concepts that we've gone through internally in meetings and configuration sessions all stays the same. The main difference is, and it's kind of difficult to put it into words really, but the main difference is HR will have to play with the wider business more, and the wider business will have to play with HR more.
I really like that, what you just said. Do you think it's because HR is getting a bigger role within the organization and Microsoft sees it that way, so it actually needs to be part of the bigger strategy?
Absolutely. I think it was the first time I was on when we were talking about HR becoming more a profit center than a cost center.
Yeah.
The merge really, really drives that point home. So HR are more than ever going to be the starting point for pretty much any process in the system. So they're going to be, the legal entities departments, they should normally fall under HR remit. Workers being created will be the starting point of somebody's journey. So in theory, if you're using finance and operations as an ERP system and you've been hired as a warehouse manager, everything you will do will be in that one finance and operations box. So without HR creating you as a worker, putting you in the positional hierarchy, do your job. So HR really are at the absolute start of the process. Yes, they can't be bypassed, they can't be messed around. HR need to be included more in the organisation. They need to have more visibility about what's going on, and they need to really have a seat at the table when they're talking about some of the more strategic decisions in the organisation, which I think overall we're seeing more and more. HR are definitely being treated with a lot more respect and kind of used more for strategic insights when businesses are making decisions. But every now and again, you do come across instances where they are still sort of left in the dark a little bit, and the merge will alleviate that a lot.
Yeah, I see that. That's pretty clear to me. So let's go into what will this mean for HR departments. I think that's an important perspective to give people listening. So what do you think needs to be done as a prerequisite, before the merge? How will this might affect the business?
Yeah, so to put the more technical specs in like a simple or layman's terms, effectively Microsoft are adopting something called lift and shift. So they'll take your D365 environment and they will simply convert it to a finance and operations environment. So when you actually go through the merge process, when it's all been arranged, that'll all be done for you. So from like a data migration standpoint, there's nothing really required from HR users or anything like that. Everything will be done in the background. And it'll be the same with FourVision web apps as well. They'll be changed to point to a finance and operations instance instead of a D365 instance. What will become a bit of an issue for data migration is if you want to then use finance and operations in the wider organization. And the reason I say that is because you'll need to make sure your legal entity structures are the same. You'll need to make sure that your operating units, so cost centers, departments, anything like that, all match up. If you're using two different sets of values in each system, that's really the main problem you're going to have. So if you're thinking about doing the merge, that's the main thing that should be thinking about looking for.
So if you keep only the HR, what is going to happen is that you go back to finance and operations. Everything is switched off on that platform. The only thing on, let's say, the switch on is HR. That's it. The problem comes when you try to switch on, or might come when you try to switch on the other functionalities within finance and operations. Okay, keep going. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Sorry, mate. Yeah, it's all good. But yeah, it's that I think will be something that will come across quite a lot, and it's something that we've been talking about a lot during implementations over the past few years. Anyway, irregardless of the merge, making sure that HR and finance are basically singing from the same song sheet. So making sure that an operating unit is used in the same context, whether it's HR or in a finance methodology. Obviously, financial dimensions and operating units and that sort of thing, they play a much bigger role in a wider ERP setting. So for the wider organization, these things get stamped on transactions, suppliers, customers, all sorts of things. And they need to be monitored as such. So it's not really necessarily just costing where an employee is. At this point, it's costing where an employee is, how many transactions go through that cost center, how many accounts in their general ledger work with those financial dimensions, all sorts of things. So that's something that will need to be checked. It'll need to be cleansed. The other main thing will be, and I don't think you'll find this anymore, but sometimes people that are using finance and operations without HR will find the HR module and start using it for something they maybe shouldn't. So checking any pre-existing data that's been left in there by random department, for example. Effectively, if there is HR data, it'll need to be checked to make sure it actually matches up with what HR data is. Normally, we'd recommend overriding it and getting rid of it. But yeah, I think those instances will genuinely be quite rare. The the security and the processes involved in really internally in Microsoft partners and the way that we do developments has changed a lot in the last 5-10 years. So it's very much an old world problem. In the last few years, we talked about before HR, they're much more recognized in the organization. So I think the chances of that happening will be pretty slim. But if it is, it's not the end of the world. It will just be a case of clearing it out, and then we can just literally dump whatever's in our newly merged F&O HR instance into your finance and ops instance, and it'll
so the main
it'll be nice
the
and
main
easy.
thing that people using these tools need to prepare for, it's regarding that part where if you want to use some more functionalities of finance and operations, if you only have HR, or if you have finance and operations and you want to use the HR module within it, that's the main thing that people need to think about, like aligning cost centers and the same values. That's basically what it is.
Pretty much, yeah. So like I think two of the big examples you can get from it really will be as soon as you've merged your HR and F&O into the same box, the finance and operations side of things can utilize a lot of the organizational data. So you can use the organizational hierarchy in your workflows for things like purchase orders, sales orders, and all sorts of stuff like that. You can also introduce things like spending limits, which is functionality that exists solely in the HR side of F&O. So you can limit approval limits to different types of jobs, for example. So a warehouse person might have an approval limit of €1,000, and a manager might have a limit of €5,000. So all of those things can be built up utilizing the HR data that goes in, and the wider organization gets the benefit pretty much immediately. There's not really any setup required for anything to do with the organizational hierarchy because it's just getting dumped in there. Like it'll just be merged in. The tables can be exported from the blank environment and put into their functioning F&O environment. And then it's up to the wider organization to adopt those changes. So really, I think it will be up to HR to inform the wider business as well. What's happening, how it's happening, what the benefits are as well. Because a lot of our implementations, finance and operations is still in its infancy in a lot of our clients. So, the wider ERP systems, it takes a long time to implement. Whereas the HR side, it takes much less time, we'll say. But yeah, so a lot of the implementations, even though HR have potentially been live for a year, 2 years, finance and operations might still be getting developed and designed and configured. So HR kind of have a little bit of an advantage on the rest of their organization in a lot of ways because they can jump ahead of the curve. They know the functionality. They've got detailed data that they can import and utilize in the organization. They can kind of be a bit of a guide, hopefully, for a lot of processes and bits and pieces that go on within the wider organization.
All right. So after the HR department figures all these things out, all preparations are done, what needs to happen behind the scenes that leads to the merge? Is what I'm getting at is, our partners, people that implement these tools like ourselves, we need to do something in terms of data, and that you used the expression before, but I don't remember the lift and the lift and shift. What is going to happen just before the merge itself happens?
So in an ideal world, the process, as far as we're aware, is when the client's ready to do the merge, because they don't necessarily have to do it on October this year. I think they have until December 2023 to make the decision. When they're ready, they can tell us, make arrangements for when they'd like it done, and then from that point, FourVision on our side, we can then make the arrangements with Microsoft and go through the lift and shift process. As far as data goes, they won't need to do anything other than the things that we'd spoken about before, checking what kind of data is being used in finance and operations. If we'll work on the assumption that every client that we have isn't using HR in F&O at the moment, so they've not touched it. It's completely empty. The lift and shift process will take place. You'll then go to sleep on Thursday with a D365 HR environment, and you'll wake up on Friday with a finance and operations environment with only HR data in it. From that point of view, if you wanted to merge the two together, it'd be a case of FourVision moving that data from the HR F&O into F&O proper. That process is relatively straightforward because the database tables are the same. We can literally just pick up everything that's in this table and pop it in there. All the authentication, the data matching will be the same because it's come out of an F&O database and it's going into an F&O database. So all that side will be very, very simple. But really, they don't need to do too much. So if you are thinking about doing this, there's not really any prerequisites you as a HR administrator will need to make. As far as data goes, I definitely think, again, we'll use the example that me and you are HR administrators in an organization. I think from a functional point of view, it will definitely be a time to maybe make yourself known to the wider project. But I know, F&O projects, they are, as we say, they're huge. They go on and they involve a lot of different people. HR, on the other hand, will probably only deal with people like FourVision. So it's definitely a time for HR to have some involvement with the wider F&O project. If nothing else, to kind of poke their head above the sand and say, okay, what can we offer you? What's your workflow approvals like? What are your, do you want to use spending limits? What of our data will be useful to you in the organization? This is the time to be saying that now, because you've then got 3 months, 6 months, a year, however long you want before you do the merge, for finance and ops to build that into their process and start thinking about it themselves. Because in a lot of instances, finance and ops won't have thought about these things. Some of the functionality that we can offer at this point from a HR standpoint, it just won't have been thought about by the organization because it won't have been visible to them as an option. So that kind of thing will be very, very important. It'll be a big win for organizations as well.
Definitely. Let me just ask you something that is pretty straightforward. Like, what is happening if you have Dynamics 365 HR and you don't choose to make the merge? Maybe it's a stupid question, but what's happening at the end of 2023 if you don't merge?
So as far as I'm aware, and I might get in trouble for being wrong here, and you'll have to forgive me, edit this out. As far as I'm aware, you'll stick with a 365 for HR instance, but it's basically unsupported. So there's no more updates for it. There's no more data changes. I think there may be the odd bug fix here and there, but to be honest, I think it will pretty much be left as a legacy system at that point. It would make a lot of sense to move to F&O. Functionality and the information, the way that they're changing or the new functionality that they're implementing and designing is designed to be in F&O. So if you want the continuous service updates and you want the changes to functionality and you want the ideas portal and all that jazz, your best.
That seems to make sense, but let's just advise our listeners to not take this 100%. If we have someone in the audience from Microsoft, just drop us a message on LinkedIn, send us an email to rectify that, and we'll be happy to do so. It's just what we believe it's happening. All right. The last thing. So we talked about the preparation. We talked about what is happening probably behind the scenes with this. What is going to happen on the day itself, on the merge itself? How much time could it take? What will be what needs to be done from an HR standpoint when you go through it?
From a HR standpoint, again, we're theorizing at this point, but My best guess is, like I said before, you'll go to bed Thursday night after making all your arrangements with me and Microsoft and all that stuff. You'll go to sleep Thursday night with a D365 for HR instance. You'll wake up on Friday like it's Christmas morning with a nice new shiny
Okay.
finance and operations environment. From a typical user point of view, so from your bog standard employees that don't have any HR access, I really doubt that they'll notice any change whatsoever. There'll be a new link in the most likely there'll be a new link to be updated on maybe SharePoint or on internal links that the company passes out and that sort of thing, or maybe some automated forwarding to the new environment location. But employee self-service, manager self-service, they've been designed to look pretty much identical. So as far as an employee goes, the main thing that they're probably going to be using finance and operations or employee self-service for is going to be things like putting in leave and absence requests and that sort of thing. Once leave's in F&O in the next month or two, that's really the only thing they're not going to see any change. I really doubt that a standard user will maybe notice that anything's changed at all. HR, their point of view will be different. They will be affected by it. So instead of having all their modules on the left, they'll have one HR module and then all the workspaces. So compensation management, personnel management, leave and absence, all that stuff. They'll all be workspaces within the wider HR module.
You don't think there will be a need for an extensive training or something like that?
I think HR will need training because I think it's going to be a change. I think as far as your users go for employees booking leave and that sort of thing, it'll probably be a good idea to tell them and maybe give them some small, quick reference guides to advising what's changing, maybe and why. But I think it will be up to the discretion of each organization. It depends as well how long they've been using D365 for and how long that they've been using the employee self-service for. If they haven't really been using the employee self-service at all up to that point, users are definitely going to need to be trained. If they've been using it for a while, I think the likelihood is people won't notice. I think the best thing to do with it would be to make sure that you tell the users why it's happening. Because they'll effectively go from using all of their HR related stuff in this box and all their finance and operations stuff like purchase orders, sales orders and stuff in this box. We can then turn around to them and say, okay, well, now you don't need to bother with this second link. Everything's in here. So you can raise a purchase order, do a leave request, change your bank account. All that jazz can be done in the same box. So I think it'll probably be worth putting some bits and pieces out for marketing purposes to the organization because it's a good win for them. But I think as far as training goes, the processes that your employees are going to be following in the employee self-service, I don't think are going to change too much. If they are, it'll be very, very minimal.
But for managers, you think it's important. For HR administrators, those people, you probably need some understanding of the platform, right?
Yeah. I think the way I always kind of explain it to clients is it's like when you move from your old HR system to D365, your brain's used to doing things a certain way, so muscle memory almost takes over. Like if you need to create a new position, you don't really think about where you need to click and go to. But when that changes slightly, or when something's slightly different, or the menu structure is a little bit different, your brain has to calculate it a bit. So I think it would be beneficial to train out the team. In a lot of instances, if they're already using F&O or they're implementing it externally anyway, there will be sandboxes available. So there shouldn't be any problem in the HR team getting some level of access to an F&O test environment internally that they're using in the wider organization, familiarizing themselves with the new layout, maybe making screenshots and making training materials and that sort of thing. And then obviously after the merge, everything can go into their production instance. But I think once the core concept of we've taken everything in HR and made it into a module in the wider system. So instead of everything being here, everything's now in one little module, and then it splits out here. So it's effectively an extra step to get to all of your HR data. So it's one more click than you were used to. But obviously there are tips and tricks within F&O, so you can favorite things, you can add a custom list of all your most commonly used modules and workspaces and stuff. So there's all sorts of bits and pieces we can do to kind of speed up the transition or make it as easy as possible. But yeah, I think it'll be an easy transition as long as people just do a little bit of investigation,
Okay.
a bit of curiosity, away, have a look in F&O, have some new friends in the wider team. You never know. But yeah, I think it's definitely a time to talk more to the wider organisation if HR aren't doing it already.
That's a great point. Yeah, just one last thing. You seem pretty relaxed about all this. It seems like you feel like it can't be a smooth transition. It doesn't need to be. You don't need to overcomplicate these things. So my last question to you is: there's no reason to worry about, as an HR person about this merge. And what is the advice that you can give people before this happens?
Yeah, I'd run for the hills. It's going to be a terrifying process. Just going to be awful.
Okay. So winter is coming again.
I think it's going to be fine. I don't genuinely believe Microsoft won't have been doing any of this without, or they won't be taking this decision lightly. So there's been a lot of effort been put into making this transition as smooth as possible. I'm not too worried about it. I think the main thing I am worried about is, as I said, the reason that I kind of wanted to have this conversation today was a lot of the information that's come out on the official channels is very, very technical.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I don't care about technical stuff. HR people don't really care about technical stuff. So it's worth kind of putting it into terms that really spell out how it will affect like a HR person, because we know how it'll affect like a database administrator or like a solutions architect in an organization. They've had all their demos and bits of information, but nothing's really been filtered down to the HR workers themselves. Yeah. I really think it's going to be a smooth transition. I really, really do.
Okay. Just a bit of curiosity and investigation.
Yeah, I can just have a conversation. It's worth doing anyway, because there are so many quick wins that HR can offer the wider organization. It's like we talked about with sort of utilizing the positional hierarchy and workflow, introducing approval limits for jobs and stuff like that. There's no real setup required, or if there is, it's very, very minimal. And the organization can get amazing amounts of benefit from those. And it really is worth, just for the sake of a 5-minute conversation, just for HR to turn around and go, oh, actually, we can help you with this, or we've got all this benefits, we've got all this beneficial data here. How can we help it make your lives easier? I think it just makes organizations run so much better. It's moving away from having silos of knowledge around and no one talks to each other, and it's not a good way to run a business. I've worked in those organizations. I'm sure you've been around them before. Nothing goes well with those kind of things, but instances where there's interpersonal communication between departments, relationship, and it just opens up corridors for people to talk. Even going forward, if they're looking at implementing something for finance or warehousing, they can then turn around and go, okay, well, HR, you should probably come into this meeting as well, just so you've got a voice and see if you can help us with anything at all. And that's the main goal. That's from a non-technical perspective. I think that's the main goal I would like to see out of the merge.
Do you think, just a small point there, do you think for companies that only use right now Dynamics 365 HR, they go back to finance and operations, do you think they will have a bit more power to influence the decision of the organization to say, look, there's this tool that we can actually have everything together. We already know how to use the HR module in there, but you can also use all these other things that probably will help bring us together. Do you think HR will have a say in that as well? With this merge gives them kind of a tool to reach that.
Definitely, yeah. I couldn't have put it better. Yeah, that's exactly what I think. Well, that's what I would hope would happen. Because I said earlier, your HR data really is like the core foundation of the system, with the exception of your chart of accounts and some of your financial information. Your legal entities, operating units, workers, positions, these are going to be the backbone of your system. So if you've got something where you can turn around to your organization and say, hey, we've got this, everything's set up, everything works, stick your finance stuff in, stick your warehousing stuff in, let's go. I think you would hope it will be a good aid in a decision if an organization are looking at making the move to any kind of ERP platform.
All right. You have been a real helping hand on our helping voice. Thanks for giving time today and this fresh perspective to the HR department about this merge. It was really helpful. I learned a lot today. I hope you enjoyed it as well, Dan.
Always, mate. Yeah, it's
always good to talk to you. I don't know. Let's see if we can have one in before Christmas. Who knows?
Definitely. Yeah. I kind of want to maintain my most features.
Yeah. I think you're way ahead on that. So that's good. That's good. All right, then. Have a good one. For everybody out there, this was the HR Vision podcast, and I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time.